to me because I lived in the 80s and after the 70s, and we had some pretty radical cases. Like I remember people getting all
By
up
the
in
way,
arms.
I thought you just turned 25.
Oh, you're my favorite.
Okay.
You just won. So it's funny because I went back and I looked at the statistics, right? So in the last 10 years before this full court was seated, 48% of the cases were decided down party lines. So, and you had some pretty radicals. You had Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you had Clarence Thomas. So you had some pretty far
Poles.
people. You had
Yeah.
Scalia on there, who I love. He's, and so, but you had 48%. When you go to this court, they've been seated they started all together in October of 2022. So 67% of their cases have been 9-0 or 8-1. They're already almost 20% ahead of the last guys and being able to come together and look at the Constitution and find, hey, this is an agreement, right? So 67% is actually high, even looking at other courts through the years. And then, okay, so that leaves you, you're remaining, what, 23%? I'm not good at math. Yeah, 23%. No, 33%.
33.
Thank you. 33%.
It's good to have an Asian here.
Yes, thank you. Oh, yeah, there we go. I should have known. I should have just asked you. 33%. But even on those, so you're like, how many's left? 90% of the cases, a liberal justice, what we consider, sided with the conservative Supreme Court.
Kagan's
So,
doing that fairly often.
yes. Yes. And actually, they said if you go back in the analysis, Kavanaugh, who everybody hated so much,
Oh yeah,
has
he's
now
been crossing over.
well, he's also considered a swing vote now. They said if you actually look at the analysis and how we categorize judges, he's a swing vote. He wouldn't even be considered a conservative judge
It's
anymore.
interesting. I was looking at the ideology scores. There are a few organizations that do
Mm-hmm.
this, and they have Roberts kind of in the center, and then Kavanaugh, and even Coney Barrett is only slightly to the right on the
Mm-hmm.
axis of Kavanaugh. So
Yeah,
you have kind of three that are kind of right of center, but not really solid conservative.
right. And so they 90% of cases, you've got one liberal going, yeah, they've got it. Let's go over here. So to me, okay, so 90% of cases are not, that leaves 10% down party lines. This is a huge improvement over what we had, right? How is this a strict conservative court when 90% of the time, at least one liberal is like, yeah, I got to give you this one.
Yeah,
This
they're
is,
right.
they're
Yeah.
right. They're right and they're right. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? It's not a conservative court. You're out of your minds with this nonsense. And so the idea that this has gone off the rails, and it's just I'm astounded at the emotional response. And I listened to the responses of the judges who didn't agree with the party line cases, and nobody gave me any constitutional law that said you should do these things. It just didn't feel right. But law is not based on feelings. Our laws are based on the Constitution. And if you don't like them, you shouldn't burn down cities and throw a fit. You should add a constitutional amendment to change it, right? So this is not a radical court by any means in this country. I actually feel pretty good about it in that it's really aligning to the Constitution and bringing things to fairness. They've made decisions I didn't agree with, but I understood their logic in aligning it to our Constitution.
Well, one of the
But
interesting things is, and
statistically, you can't back that up.
totally. And one of the interesting things is, I know there's the one case they heard about the independent state legislature theory, which the liberals are freaking out because they thought now, probably in a textualist interpretation that might have gone the way the liberals were fearing it was going to go. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a good constitutionalist will look at things with an originalist lens rather than
Yep.
textualist. And I think they probably actually made the. I have to read the opinion. I didn't read the whole thing, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they probably made the correct call on an originalist interpretation. And I don't even get. I think you hear leftists scoff about originalism, and I don't see To me, that's the common sense interpretation.
Sure it is. That's what what's the intent? That's
Yeah.
it. And anything, any document you read, any ancient text that you read, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, and again, Constitution's not ancient, but it's older. You have to look at the intent of the person who wrote it. Who were they? How did they see their world? How did they understand it? So, what did they mean?
Well,
Right?
even here's the thing. Even in if you want to talk in a language that a liberal will understand, you talk about art, music, and
Yeah.
literature, right? Which
Yeah.
they love the arts. You're never debating in those discussions something that's separate from what the artist intended. You're always talking
Exactly.
about what the message the artist was trying to convey. You're talking about
Mm-hmm.
artist's intent.
Exactly. And I think the thing that's funny to is well, the Constitution is old and we need to rewrite it. You can change it. It's called an amendment. That's what I don't. Everybody want the go to is throw it out. You don't have to throw it out. You can change it. That's what amendments are for.
The thing is, if you threw out the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
Jill Scott would not be able to change the lyrics of the national anthem and not get thrown in jail. It's
Exactly.
the Constitution that prevents that from happening.
That's it's funny to me because
That would be treason somewhere else.
yes. Oh, for sure. I've traveled all over the world. I even spent a summer in communist China.
Oh, really?
And yes, and it is astounding to me how, as Americans, it is an anathema to most Americans that the level of freedom we have, right? They cannot even begin to understand what it's like to go to a country where like I went to communist China, but I also spent a summer in Papua New Guinea in the jungle
Oh, wow.
and doing volunteer work. And we would go to different villages to do medicine and provide canned goods and canopers because sometimes I mean this was very fourth world. This was we're in a
Yeah.
vine, living in a hut, you know. And one of the things is women were not allowed to talk to the men. Like if we wanted to trade, because they wanted to trade, they don't want to take things, the nationals there, but they would not barter with women. We had to have a man with us to speak on our behalf. And if we were not married, it was why are we out? And they weren't hostile. Other than they repeatedly told me how ugly I was with my straight hair and disgusting pale skin, but and I was too tall. The average height there for a man is 5'3". I'm 5'8". So I was this horribly hideous pale blonde giant, which is fine.
I think your
But
hair is
yeah, they would
beautiful.
they would always ask, is she your wife? She's hideous. How many boars did you get
Oh,
to marry her?
oh,
I was like,
Jesus.
say 20. But they would not speak to it. And that was such like, I remember the first time that happened, I was like, wait, what? Like it was so, and I just went with it, right? That's not my culture. That's not my place. So, we just adapted and had a gentleman with us. But the idea
If
that,
you're, by the way, leftists watching this,
yeah.
respect people's cultures.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't be like,
We
I'm an
respect it.
American and I'm a feminist and you have to talk to me and give me I'm going to march around. No, I was just like, okay. And I had a friend, I was like, I think his name was Mike. I don't remember, Philip, somebody. I was like, hey, can you come over? And he came over and our translator bartered and we were able to provide the medical supplies that village needed. And we just did that at if I go
Good.
anywhere, I'm always going to respect that culture. But yeah, in China, we were not allowed to be, now this was years ago, but we were not allowed to be anywhere without a government guide at all.
Wow.
We always had to be with our guide. He picked us up on the bus in the morning at the hotel. We went on a government scheduled tour. We had to stay within that tour, and we were dropped off at the hotel that night.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, so they were very and I remember I met a man. I was in Beijing sitting in the square, and a Chinese gentleman came up and sat next to me, and he said, Are you English? And I said, well, I'm from America. And he said, oh, I've heard America's a wonderful country. And I said, yeah. And he kind of scooted over close and he looked around and he lowered it and he chatted with me for a minute. And I remember he leaned over very close and he said, God bless you. And he left
Oh.
because in China you can be locked up for that. And I thought, I'll scream. I'll go out the front yard. I'll go in the middle of Times Square and scream, God bless you. Who's going to do something about it? And this man is afraid to tell a foreigner,
Wow.
God bless you. So it's, in Americans, they're like, oh, I'll call the press and I'll get an attorney. Okay, well, they all work for the government. So good luck with that.